Most motorcycles aren't destroyed in crashes. They're destroyed by ignored maintenance that turns into $2,000 to $5,000 repair bills. No warning lights, no second chances, just fluids breaking down until engines seize, brakes fade, and clutches slip. Motorcycles run hotter and closer to their limits than cars, and neglect gets expensive fast. In this video, you'll learn which fluids fail first and the warning signs riders miss. Or you'll learn later by paying for an engine, brakes, or a rebuild that never had to happen. If a motorcycle has a pulse, engine oil is what keeps it alive under pressure. Every moment the engine runs, oil is fighting a war you never feel. It wedges itself between surfaces, moving at violent speed. It drags heat away from combustion chambers built to burn fuel for a living. It carries debris, cushions impact, and prevents metal from welding itself together. All of it happens silently. No vibration, no warning, no gratitude. That silence is why riders underestimate it. Motorcycle engines punish oil much harder than cars ever will. They spin faster. They run hotter. They cram extreme forces into compact cases with little room to recover. Many bikes ask one fluid to protect the engine, the transmission, and the clutch at the same time. There is no separation of duties, no backup system. One fluid carries the entire load, and it degrades faster than most riders expect. Heat thins it. Shear forces tear its structure apart. Microscopic metal particles contaminate it from the inside. Over time, oil loses its strength, its cushioning ability, and its grip on heat. The protective film grows thinner with every mile until friction starts winning small battles you cannot hear yet. This is where false confidence takes hold. The engine still fires immediately. Throttle response feels familiar. Power delivery seems unchanged. So intervals stretch. Oil changes get postponed. The logic becomes emotional instead of mechanical. Still running becomes mistaken for still protected. But oil does not fail dramatically. It waits. And if this breakdown already reflects the kind of responsibility you believe riding demands, hit the like button, drop a hype, and subscribe. That support is what commits us to keep bringing real-world lessons that protect riders long before failure has a chance to begin. When protection is finally gone, damage accelerates without mercy. Temperatures climb without explanation. Bearings wear rapidly. Clearances vanish. And sometimes, under load, the engine does the unthinkable. It locks. A seized motorcycle engine is not a breakdown. It is an event. Rear-wheel traction can disappear instantly. Stability vanishes. Control is replaced by surprise at speed. This is the truth riders rarely hear early enough. Neglecting oil does not just shorten engine life. It puts the rider directly in danger. Oil feels harmless because it never demands attention. It does not scream. It does not shake the bars. It works faithfully until the moment it cannot. And when it finally gives up, it does not do so gently. The machine that felt solid moments earlier becomes a source of heat, drag, and resistance. Trust collapses, not from bad luck, but from quiet delay. And even when the engine keeps pulling strong, danger may already be much closer than it feels. Because the next fluid does not decide how far you go. It decides whether you can stop at all. When panic strikes, riders do not analyze options. They squeeze. In that split second, when traffic turns hostile or traction disappears, the motorcycle is expected to respond without hesitation. Brakes are not a convenience. They are the final agreement between rider and physics. Brake fluid lives where that agreement is tested. Every hard stop converts motion into raw heat. Pads bite. Rotors absorb energy. Calipers sit inches away from extreme temperatures. And trapped inside that system is a fluid forced to endure it all. Fresh brake fluid does one job perfectly. It transfers pressure instantly. No delay, no softness, no question. Time changes that. Brake fluid absorbs moisture from the air, not quickly, quietly. Over months and miles, water lowers its boiling point. Heat that once meant control now means vapor forming inside the lines. That is where stopping power disappears. The lever still moves, resistance still exists, but pressure compresses gas instead of clamping pads. The result is brake fade, and it arrives without drama. No lights, no alarms. just the horrifying realization that you are pulling harder and decelerating less. Engine problems offer mercy. Power loss gives warning. Noise buys time. Brakes do not negotiate. When they lie, there is no shoulder to aim for and no margin to recover. What breaks riders in that moment is not speed, it is trust. They did everything instinct demanded. Full commitment, maximum input, and the motorcycle failed to answer. Service schedules often suggest brake fluid changes every 2 years. That assumes gentle use in ideal conditions. Real riding means traffic, heat, downhill runs, and repeated stress. In reality, fluid degrades far sooner than calendars admit. Brake fluid is not routine service. It is respect for pressure under fear, and after braking loads peak, stress does not vanish. It transfers inward to components that decide whether power stays smooth or turns unpredictable. And before we get to that, if this moment of brake, fade, and broken trust sounds familiar, share your experience in the comments. Because those seconds, when the lever moved but the bike did not, are lessons riders only truly understand once. And sharing them helps others recognize the warning before pressure turns into panic. After breaking chaos back into control, the rider rolls on the throttle expecting one thing: order, not speed, not excitement, consistency. The clutch and transmission exist to civilize force. They turn combustion into something usable, something predictable. On a motorcycle, that job is relentless. Unlike cars, most bikes rely on a wet clutch, meaning the clutch plates and gearbox share the same oil as the engine. One fluid carries every responsibility at once. That oil is not simply reducing friction, it is cooling clutch plates under load. It is preventing glazing. It is allowing engagement to happen smoothly while gears collide thousands of times each minute. When that oil degrades, power does not vanish. It becomes unreliable. Throttle input feels delayed. Acceleration arrives unevenly. The clutch slips when it should hold, then grabs when it should ease in. Shifts lose precision, neutral becomes elusive, downshifts feel abrupt. Nothing is fully broken, which is why riders tolerate it. They assume the problem is technique, or traffic, or fatigue. The real culprit is chemical exhaustion, high engine speeds, stop-and-go congestion, aggressive launches, and sustained highway load shred oil molecules. Friction material contaminates the fluid. Additives deplete. Heat builds faster than the system can shed it. Because the clutch and transmission depend on that same oil, deterioration spreads quickly. Shared lubrication creates a feedback loop. Slipping generates heat. Heat destroys oil. Thinner oil allows more slipping. The cycle accelerates without drama, without warning, without mercy. What makes this failure dangerous is not damage. It is uncertainty. A rider leans into a corner expecting engine braking and gets none. Exiting the turn, they anticipate smooth drive and receive a surge. In traffic, fine control becomes guesswork. Authority fractures instead of disappearing, and fractured control is harder to manage than total loss. Service intervals assume calm conditions. Real riding compresses those limits brutally. Wet clutches expose neglected oil long before engines do. This is not about mechanical perfection, it is about discipline. Because even flawless power delivery means nothing if traction disappears. And the next failure, the grip loss, does not live in the engine at all. It waits where rubber meets pavement, silently deciding whether grip stays loyal or vanishes without warning. Grip never introduces itself. It simply exists until it does not. A motorcycle gives no signal when traction is healthy. Corners feel ordinary. Braking feels controlled. Lean angles increase without drama. Confidence builds quietly, mile after mile. That silence is what makes tire failure so unforgiving. Tires are fluid systems wearing rubber disguises. Inside every tire is pressurized air, the only structure holding shape against weight, speed, lean angle, and heat. That air determines contact patch size, carcass behavior, and temperature management. When pressure drifts away from its ideal range, traction does not slowly fade. It misleads. Underinflation feels friendly at first. The ride softens. Imperfections blur. The motorcycle seems forgiving, but excess flex builds heat. overheats the rubber, and destroys its ability to recover shape. In a corner, support disappears unevenly, and the slide arrives without warning. Overinflation creates a different trap. Steering feels crisp. Turn-in feels immediate. The bike seems eager. Confidence grows quickly. Yet the contact patch shrinks, mechanical grip vanishes, and traction becomes fragile. Painted lines, cold pavement, or mid-corner bumps become instant deal breakers. Pressure loss is invisible while riding. Tires bleed air gradually. Overnight temperature swings alter internal pressure. Riding style changes load. Nothing dramatic happens until the road demands grip and receives none. That is why tire failures feel final. There is no backup system, no lever to pull harder, no second chance. When rubber lets go, negotiation ends. The motorcycle does not warn or hesitate, it simply departs. And the rider is left questioning technique, timing, or luck, unaware the mistake occurred long before the ride began. Routine is the silent safeguard here. Pressure checks are not vanity, they are environmental awareness. Pavement conditions shift, temperatures swing, tires heat and cool constantly. Manufacturer recommendations establish a starting point, not a promise. Real riding exceeds those assumptions. Daily, grip loss enforces humility because it punishes belief. Riders assume yesterday's pressure still applies. They assume normal feel equals safety. They assume rubber remembers. It does not. This failure delivers the same message every time. The environment always wins. And behind every pressure mistake hides the same accelerating force, one that destroys fluids faster than riders expect. Heat. Heat does not rush a motorcycle, it waits. Every mile adds a little more. Each stoplight traps it. Hard acceleration, long climbs, summer pavement, slow traffic, all of it layers stress the rider never sees. And unlike cars, motorcycles have almost nowhere to hide their fluids from that buildup. Cars are designed to buffer abuse, large oil reservoirs, oversized radiators, insulated engine bays, thermal mass meant to absorb punishment and spread it over time. Even when neglected, a car disperses heat across space and weight. Motorcycles live exposed. Their engines are compact. Oil capacity is limited. Components are stacked tightly together. Fluids sit inches from combustion chambers, exhaust headers, brake rotors, and clutches with minimal shielding and almost no margin. Heat has a direct path to everything that matters. Exposure accelerates decay. Engine oil breaks down faster under constant thermal stress. Brake fluid soaks heat from calipers that glow under load. Clutch oil cooks under repeated engagement while sharing the same supply as the engine. Fork oil thins as temperature cycles through every bump. Tire pressure rises and falls dramatically as pavement. Temperature changes. These systems do not fail alone. Heat connects them all. That is why breakdowns appear unrelated until they are not. Brake fade, clutch slip, inconsistent shifting, sudden loss of grip. Each one traces back to fluids pushed beyond limits. They were never designed to endure indefinitely. Service schedules assume steady airflow, moderate climates, and ideal use. Real riding means congestion, elevation changes, urban heat, and repeated stress. Heat is patient enough to wait for all of it. Riders dismiss heat because it feels harmless. The engine still runs. Brakes still bite. Tires still hold, until suddenly they do not. Heat rarely breaks components outright. It alters chemistry. It thins viscosity. It lowers boiling points. It steals margin 1 degree at a time. There is no dashboard warning for thermal fatigue. When symptoms finally appear, protection is already gone. And unlike mechanical failure, heat makes no sound. You only notice the absence it leaves behind. Motorcycles do not demand fluid respect because they are delicate. They demand it because they are exposed, and once temperature combines. With high engine speed and constant load, stress stops being gradual. It becomes relentless. That is where the most expensive lessons begin. But before getting into that, I must ask you this. If you've ever noticed your bike behaving differently after long heat exposure, what changed and how did you respond in that moment? Share your experience with us, because developing and improving riding awareness begins when individual lessons are turned into shared understanding. Most riders never realize how close to the edge their motorcycle operates during completely normal riding. Not racing, not pushing limits, just commuting, cruising, keeping pace with traffic. Compared to a car, a motorcycle lives near its mechanical ceiling almost all the time. Engine speed tells the story. A car settling into highway flow might hum along at 2,000 revolutions per minute. A motorcycle covering the same distance often spins at 5,000, 6,000, sometimes more. And that speed is not a momentary surge. It is sustained. Minutes turn into hours. Every system stays loaded, every component stays hot, and every fluid is asked to protect metal while being stressed far beyond what most riders imagine. Short bursts of high engine speed are not the danger. Machines are built for that. Duration is the threat. Constant revolutions mean constant heat. Heat thins oil. Shear forces tear it apart. Brake fluid absorbs moisture faster when systems stay hot. Coolant loses corrosion protection as thermal cycles stack endlessly. Unlike cars, motorcycles lack deep reservoirs or heavy insulation to soften that punishment. Everything is compact, exposed, and working harder. New riders often accelerate this process without realizing it, staying in lower gears because it feels smoother, holding higher engine speed for cleaner throttle response, slipping the clutch in traffic to maintain balance, riding through heat without adjusting expectations. None of it feels reckless. It feels attentive, controlled, responsible. Mechanically, it is exhausting. Experienced riders usually recognize the pattern only after consequences appear. Oil smells scorched well before the interval. Brakes fade sooner than expected. Clutches begin slipping despite careful use. Manuals did not lie. They simply assumed conditions that rarely exist. This lesson is not about riding slower. It is about understanding design reality. Motorcycles do not rest. They operate near their limit by nature. Fluids are not passive fillers. They are active components doing survival work every second the engine turns. Trusting service schedules meant for perfect conditions invites false confidence. Real roads, real traffic, and real heat erase that margin quickly. Because of this constant load, fluid failure rarely stays theoretical. Following this lesson, the damage shows up in real ways, not in manuals, but on real roads. Mechanical failure on a motorcycle almost never announces itself in a garage. It waits for motion, for speed, for commitment. It shows up when there is no shoulder to drift onto and no time to negotiate with physics. Engines do not usually fail at idle. They fail under load, passing a truck, climbing a long grade, holding highway pace on a scorching afternoon. Oil that has thinned, oxidized, or lost its protective strength can no longer keep metal apart. Friction multiplies, heat surges, clearances vanish. In moments, a bearing spins or a crankshaft binds. The rider does not see a warning light. They feel drag where power used to live. Sometimes the rear tire chatters, sometimes it locks. Either way, balance disappears without negotiation. Brake fluid failures are faster and crueler. As fluid absorbs moisture and cooks under repeated heat cycles, it stops behaving like a solid link. Instead of transferring force, it compresses. The lever firms at first, then turns vague, then comes back toward the bar. Riders squeeze harder, assuming fear or weak grip, but pressure is gone. Brake fade does not mean reduced stopping. It means stopping no longer exists. Intersections, downhill turns, sudden obstacles. The system answers with silence. Clutch and shared oil failures arrive differently, but the ending is the same. Degraded oil loses its friction balance. Plates glaze. Engagement becomes inconsistent. Power arrives late or not at all. When a rider needs acceleration to stabilize the chassis or escape a threat, the bike hesitates. That delay is not uncomfortable. It is destabilizing. In traffic or mid-corner, hesitation becomes loss of authority. What makes these failures lethal is speed. Fluid breakdown is slow. Failure is instant. Riders often say the motorcycle felt normal earlier because it was. The line was crossed quietly. There is no graceful decline during the critical second. Inputs stop matching outcomes. Control turns into confusion, then panic. Crashes caused by fluid neglect are not cinematic explosions. They are quiet absences, a lever that pulls too far, a throttle that no longer delivers, a wheel that refuses to free itself. Motorcycles run on precision. When fluids fail, precision evaporates. What makes this even more dangerous is belief. Many riders thought they followed the rules, and that's why the focus shifts to a quiet mismatch: what manuals promise versus what riding actually demands. Service manuals are not lies, but they are written for a version of riding that most motorcyclists never live. Factory fluid intervals are built on controlled assumptions: stable temperatures, steady airflow, clean fuel, light loads, minimal idling, smooth throttle use, short heat cycles followed by long cooling periods. A motorcycle ridden gently, consistently, and predictably. That world exists on test tracks and certification labs, not on crowded highways or sun-baked city streets. Manuals are designed to serve millions of riders at once and shield manufacturers from liability. They describe an average use case, not your commute, not stop-and-go traffic in summer heat, not crawling behind trucks, not filtering lanes, not carrying luggage, not riding tired, stressed, or late. Every one of those realities accelerates fluid breakdown, yet none of them shorten the service interval printed on the page. Real riding violates the manual quietly. Engines sit heat-soaked at idle with little airflow. Oil is sheared constantly as engine speed rises and falls. Brake fluid absorbs moisture faster in humid conditions and cooks under repeated stops. Wet clutches live in partial engagement during traffic instead of clean launches. Cooling systems work harder with less margin. The bike knows this. The manual does not. New riders cling to manuals because numbers feel safe. Miles and months sound definitive. Judgment feels vague. For someone trying to ride responsibly, following the book feels like discipline. The problem is simple. The book has no idea how the motorcycle is actually being used. Experienced riders notice the gap. Oil darkens early. Shifts grow notch-eye before the interval arrives. Brakes lose sharpness while the schedule says everything is fine. These are not flaws in the machine. They are warnings that real-world stress has already exceeded the assumptions behind the guidance. This is not an argument to ignore manufacturers. It is an argument to understand what their recommendations really are. Manuals define minimum standards under favorable conditions, not protection under all conditions. Treating them as absolutes turns maintenance into a checklist instead of a survival skill. And once that gap becomes clear, the question changes. It is no longer about what the manual allows. It becomes about what riders should actually do. When riders ask how often fluids should be changed, they usually want certainty, a mileage number, a date circled on a calendar, something definitive. But in real riding, should does not mean exact. It means early enough that failure never has the chance to enter the conversation. Fluid maintenance only works when it stays ahead of damage. Once a problem is obvious, the margin is already gone. Fresh oil before it smells scorched. Brake fluid replaced before the lever loses authority. Coolant serviced before heat starts creeping upward in traffic. These actions feel unnecessary precisely because they are doing their job. Prevention never announces itself. Engine oil deserves the most respect. City traffic, summer heat, short trips, and sustained high engine speed all accelerate breakdown. Oil does not suddenly fail. Its protective film thins, additives deplete, heat resistance fades. Replacing it earlier than the manual suggests costs little and removes one of the most catastrophic risks a motorcycle faces. Waiting until the limit saves nothing. Brake fluid requires an even stricter mindset. Mileage matters less than time. Moisture enters slowly, invisibly, and relentlessly. In real conditions, yearly replacement is not excessive. It is sensible. Riders who commute, ride in rain, or brake hard should treat inspection as routine. A firm lever does not equal healthy fluid. Clarity and age tell the truth. Coolant and clutch fluid are often ignored because they fail quietly. Coolant can lose corrosion protection long before overheating appears. Clutch fluid darkens as seals wear, and heat accumulates. Power delivery softens so gradually that riders adapt without realizing control is slipping. Predictable replacement prevents that slow erosion. The goal is not perfect timing, it is consistency. A rider who checks fluids, notices change, and acts early is far safer than one who follows exact intervals but never looks between them. Maintenance stops being a chore and becomes part of riding. That familiarity matters. Knowing how the bike feels, smells, and responds when everything is right builds calm confidence. But even the best routine depends on awareness, because motorcycles always warn you first. The danger is not the signal, it is what riders choose to ignore next. Motorcycles almost always warn you before fluids fail. They just refuse to shout. There is rarely a dashboard light or a dramatic sound that says, "Stop now." Instead, the bike speaks through feel, a brake lever that pulls a little farther than it did last season, an engine that no longer feels glass smooth after a long ride, heat that lingers in traffic instead of bleeding off once you get moving, a vibration that shows up where calm used to live. Nothing alarming, nothing obvious, just different. Those changes are not flaws, they are messages. Fluids shape how force moves through a motorcycle. When brake fluid absorbs moisture, pressure builds slower and release feels vague. When engine oil thins or shears, metal meets metal more often, and the motor loses its easy rhythm under load. When coolant ages, temperature stability fades even if the gauge still looks acceptable. The bike continues to function, but the margin quietly shrinks. Riders dismiss these signals for familiar reasons. Confidence whispers that it is probably nothing. Fatigue promises it can wait. Comfort finishes the job. If the bike still starts, still rolls, still stops, small changes become easy to normalize. Humans adapt quickly, even when adaptation works against them. New riders often expect failure to arrive suddenly. Seasoned riders sometimes believe they can ride through warning signs. Both assumptions delay action. Fluid-related problems punish delay because the distance between noticeable and irreversible is razor thin. The most dangerous moment is not when a system finally gives out. It is the first time a rider senses something is off and decides to ignore it. That choice rarely feels deliberate. A longer lever pull becomes normal. A harsher shift becomes character. Extra heat becomes summer riding. Attention drifts, and the warning fades with it. Attention is the skill that turns maintenance into survival. Riders who check fluids regularly notice change sooner. They remember how the motorcycle felt when everything was right. They act while the machine still offers options instead of ultimatums. Ignore those early signs long enough, and the lesson always ends the same way. And once you understand that, the entire story comes together, not as a list of fluids, but as a mindset that decides whether the ride continues at all. Every failure in this story traces back to the same quiet, dangerous belief: nothing will happen this time. Not because riders are reckless or careless, but because yesterday went fine. Because the service manual said the interval was acceptable. Because the ride feels familiar, comfortable, even routine. Neglect rarely arrives as a dramatic choice. It grows out of repetition without reflection, the subtle erosion of attention, and the false reassurance that the machine will always behave as expected. Motorcycles reward confidence, but they punish complacency. They operate close to their limits by design, asking fluids to manage heat, friction, and load every second the engine is running. When those fluids are overlooked, the machine does not betray the rider. Physics simply does what it always does, without concern for experience, intention, or optimism. Overconfidence rarely looks loud. Most of the time, it looks comfortable, trusting that the brakes will feel the same tomorrow, assuming the oil can protect a little longer, believing warning signs can wait until the next service window. These choices are small, quiet, and repeatable. Ride after ride, they stack. Maintenance only becomes dangerous when it is treated as a chore, something to postpone, something to minimize, something to complete as cheaply as possible. Once fluids fade into the background, riders begin relying on luck instead of preparation, and luck runs out quickly on machines that demand precision to survive. Responsibility changes the relationship entirely. A rider who respects fluid maintenance is not anxious or obsessive. They are calm. They know how the motorcycle feels when it is healthy. They notice when that feeling drifts. Prevention becomes about preserving authority, not avoiding disaster. Authority over braking, authority over traction, authority over the outcome of the ride. This mindset does not come from memorizing intervals or chasing perfection. It comes from humility, from understanding that motorcycles do not forgive inattention and that safety margins are created long before the ignition is turned. Fluids build those margins quietly, invisibly, mile after mile, silently protecting the rider when the unexpected arrives. When maintenance becomes a safety skill, it stops feeling like work. It becomes self-respect, a recognition that every ride is a partnership between rider and machine, and that partnership only survives when both sides are cared for. The riders who last are not the ones who take the biggest chances. They are the ones who remove danger before it ever gets a chance to appear. If the depth and care in this breakdown added real value to how you think about riding and responsibility, continue with the next video on your screen. Hit the like button, drop a hype, and subscribe. Let's build a community of riders who choose awareness over assumption, preparation over luck, and responsibility over shortcuts.